Welcome to the world of science fiction. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss new stories. Enjoy the listening. The centrifuge whirred to life in the darkness of the university lab, its soft hum masking Jacob Carter's racing heartbeat. 3 a.m. and here he was again, running unauthorized tests on his own DNA samples. The fluorescent emergency lights cast a ghostly glow across his workspace, transforming ordinary lab equipment into looming shadows. "Come on, show me something," he muttered, adjusting his microscope. The latest genetic mapping results flickered across his tablet screen, revealing patterns he'd never seen in standard human genome sequences. Strange symmetries that shouldn't exist, coding sequences that seemed to fold in on themselves like molecular origami. The lab door creaked. Jacob's head snapped up. "Working late again, Dr. Carter?" Dean Morrison's voice carried that familiar note of condescension. The older man stood in the doorway, his silver hair catching the dim light. Jacob quickly switched tabs on his tablet. "Just grading some papers, sir." "At 3 in the morning?" Morrison's eyebrows arched. "Your dedication to undergraduate biology is admirable. Though perhaps your time would be better spent on more conventional research." The implied criticism hung in the air. Jacob's jaw tightened. "My research is conventional. I'm just approaching it from a different angle." "Ah, yes, your theory about dormant evolutionary potential in human DNA." Morrison's lip curled slightly. "Still chasing science fiction, I see." "It's not science fiction. The evidence is there in the genome mapping. Evidence that has yet to convince a single peer review board." Morrison cut him off. "Jacob, you're a talented scientist, but this obsession with proving humans are somehow special? It's becoming concerning. The tenure committee will have their paper by the deadline," Jacob finished. "I just need more time to validate my findings." Morrison sighed. "See that they do. And Jacob, the lab isn't your personal playground. Use it during normal hours." The door closed with a soft click, leaving Jacob alone with his humming equipment and burning frustration. He looked down at his tablet, at the strange patterns he'd discovered lurking in what most dismissed as junk DNA. They were there. He wasn't imagining them, and he was going to prove it. His phone buzzed. A text from his Uncle Pete. "Strange lights in the north field again. That weird crystal thing is back. Might want to check it out before the neighbors start talking." Jacob stared at the message, then at his unfinished work. He'd been monitoring the mysterious appearances on his uncle's farm for weeks now, collecting readings but never getting close enough to study whatever it was properly. Each time, the object vanished before he could reach it. Not this time. He quickly packed his portable testing kit and tablet. Whatever was causing those lights, whatever that crystalline structure was, he had a feeling it was connected to his research. He just had to prove it. The drive to his uncle's farm took 30 minutes, enough time for the sky to begin lightening from black to deep blue. As he pulled up to the weathered farmhouse, he saw it. A soft, pulsing glow coming from behind the old corn silo. Uncle Pete met him on the porch, still in his pajamas and work boots. "There you are. Damn thing's been getting brighter for the past hour. Mrs. Henderson next door already called asking if we're running some kind of light show." "Has anyone else seen it?" "Not yet, but you better hurry if you want to study it. Never sticks around long." Jacob nodded, grabbing his equipment. "I'll be quick. Just need some readings." But as he rounded the silo, he stopped dead in his tracks. The object wasn't just glowing. It was hovering 3 feet off the ground, a crystalline structure the size of a basketball that seemed to pulse with its own inner light. Geometric patterns shifted across its surface like living mathematics, and it was humming, the same frequency as his lab centrifuge. "My God," he breathed, pulling out his tablet with shaking hands. This was it. This was the proof he'd been looking for. He just had to. The crystal pulsed brighter as he approached, its hum rising in pitch. Jacob's hands tingled with a strange electricity. Following pure scientific instinct, he reached out and grasped it. The world exploded in light. When his vision cleared, he found himself holding the humming crystal, and standing before him was something even more impossible. A woman with skin the color of emeralds and eyes that seemed to contain entire galaxies. She smiled, revealing teeth that were just a bit too perfect to be human. "Hello, Professor Carter. I see you found one of our beacons." She held up a matching crystal. "These always work in pairs." Jacob stumbled backward, his tablet clattering to the ground. The alien woman, because what else could she be, caught it with impossible grace before it hit the dirt. "Careful with that," she said, examining the device. "Though I must say, your scanning technology is rather quaint, like watching someone try to map an ocean with a teaspoon." Her accent was untraceable, her English perfect but with an almost musical lilt. "You're—" Jacob's scientific mind warred with what his eyes were telling him. "You're not human." How wonderfully observant. She handed him back his tablet. "I'm Tia, and you, Jacob Carter, are far more interesting than you realize." A rumbling sound drew their attention skyward. Through the pre-dawn haze, something massive was descending. A ship, its hull gleaming like liquid metal in the growing light. "Ah," Tia's smile faded slightly. "They're earlier than expected." "They?" Jacob's voice cracked. "There are more of you?" "Many more, though not all as friendly as I am." She stepped closer, her emerald skin seeming to shimmer. "We should probably move this conversation somewhere less exposed. Your uncle's house, perhaps?" As if on cue, Uncle Pete's voice carried from the porch. "Jake? You okay back there? What's all that noise?" Tia raised an eyebrow. "Unless you'd prefer to explain to him why there's an alien ship about to land in his cornfield." Jacob looked between the descending ship, the impossibly beautiful alien before him, and his uncle's approaching footsteps. His life's work had been proving something extraordinary about human DNA. Now, the extraordinary had literally landed in his lap, and was smirking at him with unnervingly perfect teeth. "Fine," he said, "but you're going to explain everything." "Oh, I'll explain quite a lot," Tia replied, already walking toward his car. "Though everything might be a bit ambitious for your current level of understanding. No offense intended." "Offense taken," Jacob muttered, following her. He called out to his uncle, "Everything's fine, just some equipment malfunctions. I'll check it again tomorrow." They reached his car just as the ship disappeared behind the tree line, its landing sending vibrations through the ground. Tia slid into the passenger seat with fluid grace, immediately beginning to examine his dashboard with childlike curiosity. "Fascinating. You still use internal combustion engines? How charmingly retro." Jacob started the car, his mind racing. "Where exactly am I supposed to be taking you?" "Your lab would be ideal. We need to compare my data on your genetic structure with your own findings." She paused, studying his expression. "You're taking this remarkably well, by the way." "I'm probably in shock," Jacob admitted, pulling onto the main road. "Also, I've spent years being called crazy for suggesting human DNA might have unusual properties. Having an actual alien show up to discuss my genetics feels almost validating." Tia's expression softened slightly. "Your theories weren't wrong, you know, just incomplete. Human DNA isn't just unusual, it's unique in ways that could change the course of galactic history." She glanced in the rearview mirror. "Which is why we should hurry. That ship belongs to the Arcturian Genetic Council, and while they're not technically enemies, they're, let's say, aggressively interested in your particular genetic makeup." "What's so special about my DNA? It's not just yours specifically, though you do have a particularly strong expression of the traits we're interested in. Human DNA contains patterns we've only seen in artifacts left by the architects, a species that vanished millennia ago, leaving behind technology we still barely understand, like that crystal you were so eager to poke at. Jacob processed this as they drove through the empty pre-dawn streets. The patterns I found in the supposedly junk DNA sequences are basically genetic artwork left by the most advanced species the galaxy has ever known, Tia finished. And those patterns might be the key to saving several species from genetic deterioration, including mine. A flash of light in the rearview mirror caught Jacob's attention. Something sleek and silvery was following them, hovering about 20 feet above the road. "Don't panic," Tia said calmly, "but we're about to have company." "Is that the Arcturian ship?" "No, that's a cultural attaché from Proxima Centauri." Her tone turned wry. "She must have picked up my signal. News travels fast when it comes to, well, you." The hovering vehicle accelerated, pulling alongside them. Through its translucent hull, Jacob glimpsed a figure with violet skin and flowing silver hair. She was stunning in an otherworldly way, like a sculpture come to life. The alien woman blew him a kiss and gestured for him to pull over. "Don't," Tia warned. "Queen Nalari is known for being rather acquisitive about things she wants." "Queen?" Jacob's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. "There's an alien queen trying to pull me over?" "The first of many, I suspect." Tia tapped something on her wrist, and suddenly Queen Nalari's ship wavered and fell back. "There. That should scramble her sensors for a few minutes." They pulled into the university parking lot just as the sun was beginning to rise. The campus was deserted except for a few early morning maintenance workers, who seemed remarkably uninterested in the emerald-skinned woman exiting Jacob's car. "They can't see me," Tia explained, noticing his confusion. "Personal camouflage field, though it won't work on anyone actively looking for alien life, so we should hurry." They rushed to his lab, where Tia immediately began examining his equipment with a mixture of amusement and approval. "Not bad, considering your technological limitations. You've managed to identify several key marker sequences. Can you please explain what's really going on?" Jacob locked the lab door. "Why are alien queens suddenly interested in my DNA? Why are you here?" Tia's playful demeanor faded slightly. She pulled up a holographic display from her wrist device, showing a complex double helix structure. "This is standard humanoid DNA across most of the galaxy, and this," she added another layer to the image, "is what's happening to it." The holographic DNA began to degrade, sections falling away or twisting unnaturally. Multiple species are experiencing unprecedented genetic deterioration. My people, the Arcturians, the Proximans, we're all slowly losing genetic stability. In a few generations, we could lose the ability to reproduce entirely. And human DNA can help? Jacob studied the hologram intently. "Your DNA contains sequences that match patterns found in ancient technology designed to stabilize and enhance genetic structures. But it's not just about the sequences themselves." She hesitated. "It's about compatibility. Human DNA, especially yours, shows signs of being deliberately engineered to be compatible with multiple species." A loud thump from above made them both look up. Through the lab's high windows they could see more ships arriving, their hulls glinting in the morning sun. "They're already setting up an observation perimeter," Tia muttered. "This is happening faster than I expected." "What's happening?" "The galactic community is about to take a very intense interest in Earth, specifically in you. Every species facing genetic collapse will want to study you, to court you, to—" She trailed off delicately. "To breed with me?" Jacob felt faint. "Is that what this is about? I'm some kind of universal genetic key?" That's a crude way of putting it, but essentially yes. Tia's expression was sympathetic but firm. And before you ask, yes, it has to be through natural reproduction. The ancient patterns in your DNA only activate through genuine biological connection. Artificial sampling doesn't work. Jacob sank into his lab chair, head spinning. So what you're telling me is that I'm about to become the most eligible bachelor in the galaxy. More like the most pursued. Tia glanced at the windows again. And not everyone will take no for an answer as politely as I have. As you have? Jacob raised an eyebrow. Are you saying you're here to court me too? For the first time, Tia looked genuinely flustered. I'm here to protect you and study the phenomenon. My people may be facing the same crisis, but I'm a scientist first. Like you. Before Jacob could respond, his lab door burst open. Dean Morrison stood there, flanked by two figures in sleek uniforms, one with violet skin like Queen Nalari, the other with metallic scales instead of skin. Dr. Carter, Morrison said stiffly, it seems you have some visitors from the Interstellar Genetic Preservation Council. The metallic-scaled figure stepped forward, their movements fluid and precise. Professor Jacob Carter, I am Ambassador Kazar of the Interstellar Genetic Preservation Council. Your planet has been designated as a protected genetic reserve, effective immediately. A what? Jacob looked between Kazar and Tia, who had moved subtly closer to him. It means, Tia explained quietly, that you've just become galactic property. Not property, Kazar corrected smoothly. A protected resource. Your genetic profile, Professor Carter, represents hope for dozens of species facing extinction. We're here to ensure that hope is properly managed. Queen Nalari swept into the room, her violet skin practically glowing in the fluorescent light. And to ensure fair access to Earth's genetic resources. Her eyes locked onto Jacob with predatory interest. All potential matches must have equal opportunity to present their case. Dean Morrison cleared his throat. Dr. Carter, as a representative of the university, I must inform you that your unique situation has already been discussed with various Earth governments. They've agreed to full cooperation with the Council. You mean they've agreed to treat me like a breeding stock, Jacob said flatly. They've agreed to prevent an interstellar diplomatic crisis, Kazar corrected. One that could arise if certain parties felt they were being denied access to vital genetic resources. Tia stepped between them and Jacob. He's not a resource. He's a person, with rights and choices. Of course, Queen Nalari purred. We're simply here to expand his choices. She moved closer, her perfect features arranged in an alluring smile, to show him all the possibilities the galaxy has to offer. Through the lab windows, Jacob could see more ships arriving, their shapes varied and alien against the morning sky. News vans were pulling into the parking lot below. Someone had tipped off the media. His quiet life of research was evaporating before his eyes. What if I refuse? He asked, already knowing the answer. Kazar's metallic scales shifted in what might have been sympathy. That would be unfortunate. Several species are depending on the possibility of genetic stabilization. The political implications of refusal could be severe. In other words, Tia said bitterly, Earth isn't ready for the kind of attention refusing would bring. Jacob looked at his lab equipment, at the research he'd done trying to prove human DNA was special. He'd wanted recognition, wanted to prove he wasn't crazy. Now that proof had arrived in the form of an interstellar dating competition he wanted no part of. I need time, he said finally, to process this, to understand what's being asked of me. Of course, Kazar nodded. You'll be given quarters in the diplomatic compound we're establishing, for your protection naturally. He'll stay where he chooses, Tia countered, and I'll be staying as his scientific advisor. Queen Nalari's perfect features showed a flicker of annoyance. We all will be staying, dear. The council has declared open courtship season, after all. Jacob watched as more figures appeared in the hallway behind Morrison, aliens of various shapes and colors, all focused on him with intense interest. His dream of proving humanity's special place in the cosmos had come true in the worst possible way. He caught Tia's eye, saw genuine concern there beneath her usual sardonic expression. At least he had one ally in this mess, even if her own motives weren't entirely clear. Fine, he said, straightening his shoulders. But I have conditions. This happens on my terms, or it doesn't happen at all. The gathered aliens murmured among themselves. Khazar's scales rippled thoughtfully. State your terms. But before Jacob could speak, alarms began blaring throughout the building. Through the windows, a massive ship was descending, larger than any that had arrived so far, its hull dark and threatening. Ah, Queen Nalari sighed. It seems the Arcturians have finally arrived. Tia grabbed Jacob's arm. And that's our cue to leave, now. As they rushed from the lab, pursued by protests from the council and sultry calls from Queen Nalari, Jacob realized his life had irrevocably changed. He'd wanted to prove human DNA was special. Instead, he'd become the galaxy's most eligible bachelor, with the fate of multiple species hanging on his choice of partner. The first act of his ordinary life was ending. The question was, would he be able to write the next act on his own terms, or would the galaxy write it for him? You know, when I said I wanted to work from home, this isn't exactly what I had in mind, Jacob muttered, peering through his living room blinds at the array of alien ships hovering over his suburban neighborhood. 3 weeks had passed since his life had turned into what felt like a cosmic reality show. Tia lounged on his couch, her emerald skin contrasting with the worn beige upholstery as she flipped through channels on his TV. At least they're respecting the restraining field I put up, mostly. Mostly doesn't explain why I found Queen Nalari in my kitchen this morning, trying to make me pancakes. Were they at least good pancakes? They were purple and started hovering. Tia snorted. Classic Proximan cooking. They never could grasp that not everything needs to be anti-gravity compatible. She sat up, her expression turning more serious. But we should talk about the results from your latest blood work. Jacob dropped onto the couch beside her, careful to maintain what he'd learned was a professional distance, though lately that distance had started feeling more like a challenge than a boundary. Let me guess, more mysterious markers? More than that? Tia pulled up a holographic display from her wrist device. Your immune system is extraordinary. The way it adapts and evolves, I've never seen anything like it. Almost as if it was designed that way, Jacob finished. He'd been pondering the same thing since discovering his own unusual resistance to disease years ago. That's what started my whole research project. I haven't been sick since I was 12. Tia's eyes widened. Why didn't you tell me this before? Because the last time I told a colleague about my perfect health record, they suggested I was either lying or a hypochondriac. He managed a wry smile. Didn't think it was relevant to the whole galaxy's most eligible bachelor situation. Jacob, it's not just relevant. It might be central to everything. Your immunity, your genetic compatibility. They're connected. She leaned closer, her excitement making her eyes sparkle. The architects didn't just leave patterns in your DNA. They left a complete system for genetic adaptation and repair. A loud crash from the kitchen interrupted them. They rushed in to find Queen Nalari had somehow bypassed the restraining field again. She stood among scattered pots and pans, wearing what appeared to be an attempt at a traditional American housewife's outfit. though the violet skin and floating hair somewhat ruined the effect. "Jacob, darling," she beamed. "I thought I'd try making that charming earth dish called meatloaf, though I'm having trouble understanding why you keep your animal protein in such rigid containers." "Those are called cans, Your Majesty," Jacob sighed, watching as Nalari attempted to open a can of corn with what looked suspiciously like a laser cutter. "And that's not for meatloaf." "Oh, please, call me Nala," she purred, floating closer. "After all, we're practically courting now." "We're really not," Jacob muttered, though he had to admit her attempts at Earth customs were becoming more endearing than annoying. Last week she tried to order pizza by telepathically communicating with his microwave. Tia stepped between them, her usual sardonic smile a bit tighter than normal. Fascinating as this domestic invasion is, we were in the middle of something important. "Oh yes, the immunity question." Nalari's expression turned calculating. "We've noticed that too. In fact, my scientists have some theories they'd love to discuss. Over dinner, perhaps." Before Jacob could respond, his phone buzzed. A text from his mother. "Don't forget, family dinner tonight. Bringing that nice girl from work? The one you mentioned?" Jacob froze. He'd completely forgotten about weekly family dinner, a Carter tradition he'd never missed. And yes, he had mentioned bringing someone from work, trying to explain Tia's presence in his life without mentioning the whole alien situation. "Everything okay?" Tia asked, noticing his expression. "I, hope you like pot roast?" He showed her the text. Nalari clapped her hands delightedly. "Earth family customs. I simply must observe this anthropological phenomenon." "Absolutely not," Jacob and Tia said simultaneously. "What you must do," Tia continued firmly, "is respect the restraining field and proper diplomatic protocols." "But I am being diplomatic," Nalari protested, gesturing at her outfit. "I'm even wearing these primitive fabric coverings instead of my natural bioluminescence." Jacob pinched the bridge of his nose. "Look, you're Nalari. I appreciate the effort, but my parents think I'm bringing a colleague from the university, just Tia, who they think is very much human." "And how exactly were you planning to explain my skin tone?" Tia asked dryly. "I told them you're from California." Both aliens stared at him. "What? It worked." Mom just said, "Oh, that explains it," and started planning what wine to serve. A sudden ripple of energy made them all turn. The paired crystals, Jacob's in its lead-lined box and Tia's in her scientific kit, began pulsing in synchronization. As they watched, it projected a complex series of star maps across his kitchen walls. "That's not good," Tia muttered, studying the patterns. "These coordinates, they're getting more specific." "More specific to what?" Jacob asked, though part of him already knew. "To you. It's like the device is calling something, or someone." Nalari's playful demeanor vanished. "The Arcturians, they must have similar devices, tracking the signal." She turned to Jacob, suddenly serious. "You need protection. My fleet." "Will stay exactly where it is," Tia cut in. "The Council's restraining field applies to everyone." Jacob's phone buzzed again. "Mom wants to know if you have any food allergies," he told Tia weakly. She gave him a look that somehow combined exasperation and fondness. "Tell her I'm fine with anything, but we need to deal with this signal before—" The kitchen lights flickered. A deep thrumming filled the air. "Too late," Nalari whispered. The shadows in the kitchen stretched and twisted unnaturally as a new presence made itself known. Through the window, Jacob could see a massive ship descending, sleek, black, and somehow wrong in a way that made his eyes hurt to look at it. "Nexara," Tia breathed, unconsciously moving closer to Jacob. "The Arcturian sovereign." "Well," Nalari huffed, smoothing her Earth-style dress, This dinner party just got considerably more complicated. Jacob's phone buzzed yet again. This time, it was his sister. Mom's making her famous apple pie. Don't you dare be late again. You know what? Jacob grabbed his car keys. Let's go. Right now. Go? Tia blinked. The most dangerous genetic manipulator in the galaxy is landing in your backyard, and you want to go to family dinner. Exactly. Let them deal with my mother's passive-aggressive comments about my career choices and dating life. I bet even Ara would think twice. A laugh escaped Tia before she could stop it. A real one, not her usual sardonic chuckle. The sound made something warm flutter in Jacob's chest. You can't just leave, Nalari protested. This is a diplomatic crisis. Watch me. Jacob grabbed Tia's hand without thinking. Coming? She looked at their joined hands, then at his face. To meet your parents? As your colleague from California? Well, you did say you wanted to study human customs up close. The kitchen began to vibrate as Ara's ship got closer. Objects started floating, including Nalari's failed attempt at meatloaf. Fine, Tia said quickly, but I'm driving. Your Earth vehicles are laughably slow. They made it to his car just as a beam of dark energy pierced the clouds above his house. Jacob caught a glimpse of a figure materializing in his kitchen. Tall, elegant, and radiating cold power. Your mother's pot roast better be worth potentially starting an interstellar incident, Tia muttered as they sped away. Trust me, it is. Though fair warning, she's definitely going to ask when we're getting married. When we're what? I may have mentioned you were a colleague, and brilliant, and that we spend a lot of time together in the lab. To my mother, that's practically an engagement announcement. Tia's green skin took on a slightly darker hue that Jacob was starting to recognize as a blush. You talk about me to your mother? Well, now it was his turn to blush. You're kind of a big part of my life now, even if most of that involves preventing alien queens from redecorating my kitchen. They drove in charged silence for a moment, both very aware of how normal this felt, despite the alien ships following at a discreet distance and the fact that Tia had somehow modified his Honda Civic to break several laws of physics. Jacob, she said finally, her voice unusually hesitant. There's something I need to tell you about my people. We're not just facing genetic degradation, His phone interrupted again, this time with a text from Ara herself. Your departure is noted, Professor Carter, but do not think you can escape your destiny. The pain of my people demands action. How did she get my number? Probably from Nalari's group chat. There's a group chat? Oh yes, Earth's hottest bachelor fan club. They share tips on Earth customs and debate the best ways to court you. Last week they were very excited about something called Netflix and Chill. Jacob groaned. Please tell me you're joking. Tia's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. I wish I were. But Jacob, about what I need to tell you. The crystal device, Jacob realized suddenly. The pain Ara mentioned. That's what's happening to your people too, isn't it? Tia's hands tightened on the steering wheel. Yes, but we handle it differently. The Arcturians believe in forcing evolution, in taking what they need. My people, we believe in finding natural solutions, in letting bonds form organically. They pulled up to his parents' modest suburban home. Through the windows, Jacob could see his mother setting the table, his father manning the grill in the backyard. A scene of such normal American domesticity it felt surreal given their situation. That's why you're different from the others, he said softly. You're not just here for my DNA. You're looking for real answers. I was. Tia met his eyes. At first. But now. A shadow fell over the car as Ara's ship moved into position above the neighborhood. its presence like a dark cloud blocking the setting sun. Smaller ships, Nalaris and others, maintained their distance but remained visible. "We should go in," Jacob said, though neither of them moved, "before Mom sends out a search party." "Jacob," Tia's voice was urgent now, "whatever Xara offers you, whatever she threatens, don't trust her. The Arcturians' pain has driven them to extreme measures. They've destroyed entire species trying to force genetic compatibility." The front door opened, spilling warm light onto the lawn. Jacob's mother appeared, waving enthusiastically. "There you are, and this must be Tia. Come in, come in. Dinner's getting cold." As they walked to the door, Jacob whispered, "Ready to pretend you're from California? Please. I've studied Earth cultures extensively. How hard can it be?" 2 hours later, Jacob watched in amazement as Tia charmed his entire family. She'd managed to explain her green skin as an experimental sunscreen formula she was developing, so California, his mother had nodded sagely, complimented his father's grilling technique with surprising technical accuracy, and was now discussing quantum physics with his teenage nephew, who looked at her like she'd hung the moon. It was working. It was actually working. For one blessed evening, everything felt almost normal. Then the lights went out. In the sudden darkness, the crystal device in Jacob's pocket began to pulse with increasing intensity. Through the dining room window, he could see Xara's ship descending, its dark energy field extending like tentacles toward the house. "Jacob," Tia's voice was tight with fear. "The signal. It's not just tracking you anymore. It's—" The crystal burst from its containment, rising to meet Tia's matching beacon as she pulled it from her kit. Complex patterns of light spiraled out from it, forming a double helix that seemed to reach into infinity. "Oh my," his mother said faintly. "That's not from California, is it?" Before anyone could respond, the dark energy tendrils smashed through the windows. Jacob felt something cold wrap around his mind, and Xara's voice echoed in his thoughts. "Enough games, Professor Carter. Your genetic pattern holds the key to ending our pain, and I will have it, with or without your cooperation." The last thing Jacob saw before the darkness took him was Tia's face, her expression transforming from fear to fierce determination as she reached for him. His carefully constructed normal life had just shattered completely. Act 2 was ending, and as consciousness faded, he realized two things. He was falling in love with an alien scientist, and the fate of multiple species now hung on what would happen next. Jacob regained consciousness in what appeared to be a high-tech medical bay, the dark metal walls pulsing with faint bioluminescent patterns. His first coherent thought was of his mother's interrupted dinner party. "Mom's going to kill me," he muttered, "assuming the aliens don't beat her to it." "Your maternal unit has been adequately contained," a cold voice responded, "along with the rest of your family." Xara stepped into view, her form both beautiful and terrifying. Unlike Nalari's violet warmth or Tia's emerald vitality, Xara's skin seemed to absorb light, creating an effect like living shadow. Her movements were too perfect, too precise, as if she'd studied human motion but couldn't quite replicate its natural imperfections. "Where's Tia?" Jacob demanded, struggling against his restraints. "The verdant scientist is occupied." Xara's smile didn't reach her eyes. "But we have more pressing matters to discuss. Your DNA, for instance, and how it will save my species." "By force? That's not how it works. The device? The device is an artifact, nothing more. My scientists have already begun analyzing your genetic structure. We don't need ancient technology to tell us what we can take for ourselves." A screen materialized, showing Jacob's family confined in what looked like a luxurious but secure holding area. His mother was giving one of Xara's guards her patented, disappointed parent look while simultaneously trying to force-feed them pot roast. Your maternal unit is formidable, Nexara admitted. She's already organized the other prisoners into a cooking rotation and established a book club. Despite everything, Jacob had to suppress a laugh. Trust his mom to treat alien abduction like a neighborhood social event. But sentiment won't save them, Nexara continued. Only your cooperation can do that. My people suffer constant pain as our genetics degrade. Every moment you resist condemns more of us to agony. If you're in such pain, Jacob challenged, why waste energy maintaining a prisoner facility nice enough for a book club? Nexara's perfect features flickered with genuine emotion, the first he'd seen from her. Because despite what you may think, we are not monsters. We simply cannot afford the luxury of waiting for natural solutions while our children scream in pain. Before Jacob could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. The screen showing his family switched to an external view, revealing absolute chaos in the skies above his small town. Hundreds of ships had appeared. Some he recognized as belonging to Nalari's fleet, others completely new. And at their center, a familiar crystalline structure was growing, expanding until it dwarfed even Nexara's massive vessel. Impossible, Nexara breathed. The crystals were separated. Yeah, about that. A wonderfully familiar voice called from the doorway. Maybe don't underestimate Earth storage solutions next time. Tia stood in the doorway, looking slightly singed but triumphant. The paired crystals floated between them, their energies intertwining. Behind her, Jacob glimpsed Queen Nalari leading what appeared to be a heavily armed rescue party wearing Earth's hottest bachelor fan club t-shirts. How? Nexara demanded, dark energy crackling around her form. Twin beacons need to be kept apart, Tia smirked. Your mom's casserole dish made an excellent hiding place for mine. The device responds to her, Jacob realized, like it responds to me. Because she actually bothered to form a real connection with you, Nalari called out, her violet skin glowing with battle readiness. Unlike some people who just want to harvest genetic material. Nexara's perfect composure cracked. You don't understand. None of you understand what it's like, watching your people suffer, feeling the degradation in your own cells. Actually, Tia interrupted, her voice gentler now. We do understand. Why do you think we're all here? But there's a right way and a wrong way to save our species. The architects left us a roadmap. We just weren't seeing it clearly. The crystal device pulsed brighter, projecting complex patterns across the medical bay. But this time, instead of star maps or DNA sequences, it showed something else. Connections, billions of lines of light linking different genetic patterns, strengthening and stabilizing each other. It's not just about compatible DNA, Jacob said slowly, understanding dawning. It's about connection itself, real bonds between species, freely chosen and honestly felt. The architects didn't engineer humanity to be universal donors. They engineered us to be bridges. Bridges? Nexara's voice held both skepticism and desperate hope. Look at the patterns, Tia urged. Each connection makes both parties stronger. It's not about taking or forcing. It's about growing together. That's why artificial sampling doesn't work. The DNA has to want to adapt. DNA doesn't have wants, Nexara scoffed, but her resistance was weakening. Doesn't it? Jacob asked. Every cell in our bodies strives to survive, to connect, to become more than it is, but it can't do that under force. Trust me, I'm a biology professor. A small explosion rocked the ship, followed by what sounded suspiciously like Jacob's mother yelling about proper dinner party etiquette. Speaking of force, Nalari said dryly, perhaps we should continue this discussion somewhere less combustible, preferably before Mrs. Carter convinces more of your guards to join her recipe exchange program. The dark energy around Nexara flickered and faded. For a moment, she looked less like an all-powerful genetic manipulator and more like someone desperately trying to save her family. "Your mother," she said to Jacob, "has been teaching my guards about something called comfort food. They've started asking for sick days." "Yeah, she has that effect on people." Jacob grinned as Tia released his restraints. "Even alien people, apparently." Another explosion rattled the ship, this one accompanied by his father's voice. "Nobody leaves a Carter family dinner early. It's just not polite." "Your parental units are remarkably adaptable," Nalari observed, watching the chaos on the security feeds. "They've organized an entire resistance movement based on Earth social customs." "Speaking of customs," Tia said, helping Jacob to his feet, "the device is showing something new." The crystalline structure had expanded its projection, filling the room with intricate patterns of light. But now they could see words interwoven with the genetic codes, ancient instructions written in a language that somehow translated itself directly into understanding. "The architects," Jacob read, fascination overtaking his fear, "created humanity as part of a grand experiment in genetic harmony. They knew forced evolution would eventually lead to degradation, so they engineered a species capable of forming adaptive bonds naturally. Through love," Tia added softly. "They literally engineered love into human DNA." Xara stepped closer to the projection, her shadow-dark skin reflecting the patterns. "But how does that help my people now? Our pain is real, immediate." "Because," Jacob said, reaching for Tia's hand without hesitation, "now we understand how to fix it, not through force or artificial manipulation, but through genuine connection. Your scientists have been trying to extract and replicate human DNA patterns, but those patterns only activate when there's real emotional resonance." "Like how the device responds to both you and Tia," Nalari observed shrewdly. "Because your connection is real." Jacob felt Tia's hand tighten in his. The crystal pulsed brighter, its light seeming to flow between them. "Exactly," he continued. "We don't need to force anything. We just need to create opportunities for real bonds to form, whether they're romantic, familial, or just genuine friendship. Each connection helps stabilize the genetic patterns of both species involved." "Like how your guards are already showing reduced pain levels after bonding with my mom over recipes," Tia added. "The effect is small, but it's real, and it's just the beginning." A new explosion rocked the ship, but this time it wasn't from the resistance. The massive crystalline structure outside had begun to transform, its surfaces reflecting and refracting until it formed what looked like a giant laboratory suspended in the sky. "The architects didn't just leave us instructions," Tia breathed. "They left us everything we need to make it work." "A genetic research facility," Xara realized, "designed specifically for cross-species collaboration." "And look where it's centered," Jacob pointed out. The floating structure had positioned itself directly above his uncle's farm, where everything had started. "They planned this all along. They knew eventually we'd figure it out." "Assuming we didn't destroy each other first," Nalari added dryly. "Speaking of which, Xara, perhaps it's time to consider a less aggressive approach to diplomacy." The Arcturian sovereign stood silent for a long moment, watching the patterns of light dance across her skin. When she spoke, her voice had lost its cold perfection. "My youngest sister," she said quietly, "hasn't slept in 3 years because of the pain. I promised her I would find a cure no matter the cost." She turned to Jacob and Tia. "But perhaps the cost doesn't have to be so high." "It doesn't," Jacob assured her. "Look, we're already seeing results with just casual interactions. Imagine what we could accomplish with dedicated research, voluntary participation, and actual understanding of how these bonds work." The security feed showed his mother now firmly in control of the holding area, organizing what appeared to be an impromptu potluck while lecturing alien guards about proper table settings. "Your maternal unit," Xara observed, "has reduced pain levels in that entire section by 23% simply by treating my people like family." "That's Mom for you," Jacob grinned. "Never met a person or alien she couldn't adopt." "So what do you say?" Tia stepped forward, offering her hand to Xara. "Instead of fighting over human DNA, we work together to understand it, create something that helps everyone." The dark energy around Xara flickered one last time, then dissolved completely. She looked at Tia's offered hand, then at Jacob, then at the magnificent structure floating above the Iowa countryside. "My sister," she said finally, "would probably enjoy your mother's book club." As the sunset painted the Iowa sky in shades of pink and gold, the newly established Interstellar Genetic Research Institute hummed with activity. 6 months had passed since the night of the interrupted dinner party, and Jacob's small town had transformed into something unprecedented, Earth's first truly intergalactic community. The crystalline facility floated serenely above his uncle's cornfield, now surrounded by a thriving settlement of scientists, diplomats, and researchers from across the galaxy. Below it, his mother's weekly potluck dinners had become legendary events where species from dozens of worlds gathered to share food, stories, and the kind of bonds that were already showing promising genetic results. "Your theory about comfort food actually promoting genetic stability was right," Jacob told Tia as they walked through the Institute's main lab. "Mom's pot roast has become the control group in 3 different studies. And Nalari's anti-gravity pancakes are showing surprising potential," Tia added, checking readings on a holographic display. "Though perhaps we should stop letting her experiment with Earth breakfast foods." "Speaking of experiments," a familiar voice called. Xara approached, looking notably less intimidating in standard lab gear. "The latest results from the voluntary bonding program are extraordinary. My sister's pain levels have decreased by 67% since she joined your mother's book club." "How's she liking Pride and Prejudice?" Jacob asked. "She's Team Darcy, obviously." Xara's perfect features softened into something close to a real smile. "Though she thinks Elizabeth should have considered the genetic compatibility angles more carefully." They reached the Institute's observation deck, where the evening's main event was about to begin. Below them, the farm had been transformed into an outdoor reception area where humans and aliens mingled easily, bound together by something stronger than politics or protocol. Queen Nalari, resplendent in a violet gown that somehow incorporated both traditional Proximan bioluminescence and Earth wedding fashion, was directing final preparations with characteristic enthusiasm. "The first official interspecies union on Earth," she declared proudly. "Though certainly not the last if my dating app for genetic compatibility takes off." "You created a dating app?" Jacob asked, alarmed. "Of course. We can't all rely on dramatic alien abductions and family dinner interruptions to find love across the stars." Tia laughed, her emerald skin glowing in the sunset light. "She has a point, though I prefer our way." Jacob looked at her, his brilliant, sarcastic, beautiful alien scientist, and felt the paired crystals they each carried pulse warmly in response to his emotions. The same device that would, in a few minutes, help them formally bind their genetics together in front of representatives from across the galaxy. "Ready to make history?" he asked, offering her his arm. "Please," she smirked. "We already did that. This is just making it official." As they descended to join their impossibly diverse gathering of friends and family, Jacob reflected on how much had changed. His quiet life had exploded into something extraordinary. His small-town existence expanded to encompass the stars themselves. But in the end, it wasn't about genetics or ancient artifacts or even saving multiple species. It was about connection, real, genuine bonds that transcended biology and crossed the boundaries of space itself. By the way, Tia whispered as they reached the makeshift altar, your mother's already planning next week's potluck. Apparently, she's teaching the Arcturians how to make apple pie. Jacob grinned. Well, you know what they say. The way to universal genetic stability is through the stomach. Nobody says that. They will now. Above them, the stars began to emerge, twinkling down on this unlikely gathering where love, science, and family dinner had somehow combined to change the course of galactic history. And as Jacob took Tia's hand, ready to begin their next chapter together, he couldn't help but think that sometimes the most extraordinary discoveries come from simply opening your heart to the impossible. This story began like many scientific discoveries, with an unexpected observation in an Iowa cornfield. But unlike most discoveries, this one grew into something far more peculiar, a tale of alien DNA, hovering pancakes, and a mother's pot roast that somehow became central to interstellar diplomacy. To those who followed Jacob and Tia's journey from that first crystal's glow to their rather unconventional wedding, thank you for believing that even the most outlandish scientific theories sometimes just need a family dinner to prove them right. And if you ever find yourself in a small Midwestern town where the local diner serves both human and alien cuisine, where book clubs discuss Earth classics with beings from across the galaxy, and where love proves stronger than genetic engineering, well, you might just have wandered into the right universe. Keep looking up at the stars, and maybe keep a casserole dish handy just in case. With gratitude across light years, your storyteller. P.S. Queen Nalari's dating app is still in beta testing. Results may vary by species.